Para entonar el himno nacional mexicano y dar inicio a la inauguración de la 16ª Conferencia Internacional sobre Cambio Climático COP-16 CMP6, invitamos a todos los presentes a permanecer de pie. Sean tan amables de ocupar sus lugares. Toma la palabra el ciudadano doctor José Mario Molina Pasquel Enríquez, presidente del Centro Mario Molina para Estudios Estratégicos sobre Energía y Medio Ambiente.
Señor Presidente Felipe Calderón Hinojosa, Secretaria Patricia Espinosa, Secretario Juan Elvira, Ministra Cristiana Figueres, miembros del Presidium, delegados, representantes, señoras y señores. Bienvenidos a la 16ª Conferencia de las Partes, la COP-16. Es para mí un gran honor el tener la oportunidad de dirigirles unas palabras al inicio de este evento tan importante para todo el planeta, sobre todo considerando que se está llevando a cabo en México, el país donde nací. Si me lo permite, señor presidente, me voy a tomar la libertad de continuar en inglés. Conociendo el dominio que usted tiene de este idioma, pues quiero dirigir estas palabras lo más directamente posible a la mayoría de los participantes en este evento. So I'm switching to English, and I would like to welcome all of you to Mexico and to Cancun, and to the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which consists of the 16th Conference of the Parties, the COP-16, and CMP6. I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to participate in the inauguration of this event. As a scientist, this gives me the opportunity to emphasize the crucial role that the scientific method has played in elucidating the nature of the climate change problem. This Conference of the Parties is truly a historic event. Climate change is the most serious environmental challenge our society has ever confronted, and we have the opportunity at this event to successfully address this problem and to engage in a process that will ultimately reduce the risk of severe damage to our environment with possibly catastrophic consequences. The problem is indeed very challenging, but we do have the means to address it effectively. Last year, at the COP-15 in Copenhagen, more than 100 heads of state supported the goal of limiting the average temperature increase of the Earth's surface below 2 degrees Celsius in order to prevent dangerous interference with the climate system. It is often stated that this is what science tells us. Let me explain, though, that science does not tell us what to do. It only advises us what might happen as a result of different courses of action. The 2 degrees figure comes about by considering that there are technological solutions to the problem at hand, and by considering as well that the cost of taking the necessary measures to achieve the 2 degrees goal is relatively small, possibly only 1 or perhaps 2 or even 3% of global GDP. But most importantly, the consensus among economic analysts is that the cost of not implementing such measures is very likely significantly higher. In fact, postponing action and thus risking a temperature increase of 4 or more degrees could imply astronomical costs for future generations, threatening both our economic systems and our governance systems. Recent findings tell us that if we continue with unabated emissions of greenhouse gases, there is a significant risk of reaching certain tipping points in coming decades as the surface temperature increases, leading to changes in the Earth's climate system that for all practical purposes will be irreversible, such as melting of the poles, drying of the Amazon forests, or disappearing Indian monsoon. Such catastrophes could have devastating consequences for literally hundreds or even thousands of millions of the Earth's inhabitants. And even if the risk of such events occurring is a mere 10 or 20%, experts agree that this risk should actually dominate economic considerations. So the science is clear. The solution is at hand, and the cost of inaction is no doubt larger than the cost of taking the necessary measures. Why then has the problem not been solved? You are surely well aware of the difficulties which I will not list here. Let me just stress that all the countries of the planet win if you come up with the right solutions. They all lose if you don't. Now, I do not underestimate the magnitude of the challenge. Developed nations do not want to lose competitiveness, and developing nations and emerging economies want to make sure that their economic development is not threatened. If, however, we all work together with creativity, we can actually improve the chances of achieving the desired economic growth by means of well-planned, low-emission development plans. Otherwise, the impacts of climate change might well prevent the eradication of poverty in many developing countries. I urge you to reach agreement on concrete steps to move us closer to an international regime that formalizes the commitments that many nations have already made, and that incorporates as well strong support for adaptation to climate change impacts. I also urge you to outline in some detail the steps that are required to reach a definitive agreement within the next few years. I urge you furthermore to agree to take whatever fast action mitigation measures are feasible, consistent with the Bali Action Plan that calls for all parties to deliver an effective post-2012 regime. We cannot afford to wait yet another decade. I just mentioned that there are political difficulties. The basic conclusions of the scientific community are that the climate is changing as a consequence of human activities, with potentially very serious consequences for society. And yet, in all sorts of media reports, it has been stated in this past year that this basic scientific conclusion is questionable, that maybe the climate change is happening, but it's not the result of human activities. Why is this so? There are powerful interest groups that have mounted a very successful public relations campaign to discredit climate change science. The scientific community is, of course, aware that the current understanding of the science of climate change is far from perfect and that much remains to be learned. But enough is known to estimate the probabilities that certain events will take place if society continues with business as usual emissions of greenhouse gases. As expressed in the last report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, The consensus among the vast majority of climate scientists is that there is about a 9 out of 10 chance that the observed increase in global average temperature since the Industrial Revolution is indeed a consequence of the increase in atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases caused by human activities. The existing body of climate science, while not comprehensive and with still many questions to be answered, is robust and is extensive and is based on many hundreds of studies conducted literally by thousands of highly trained scientists with transparent methodologies, with publication in public and scientific journals, with rigorous peer review, and so on. And this is precisely the information that society and decision makers in government need in order to assess the risk associated with the continuous emission of greenhouse gases. I challenge all those that question the validity of climate change science to a rational and civilized discussion of these matters. I would like to emphasize that policy decisions on climate change have been made by society at large, and more specifically by policymakers in coordination with delegates such as yourselves. Scientists, engineers, economists, and other experts should merely provide the necessary information. But in my opinion, even if there is a mere 50% probability that the changes in climate that have taken place in recent decades are caused by human activities, society should certainly adopt the necessary measures to reduce greenhouse emissions. But here I'm not speaking as a scientist, but rather as an individual who strongly supports universal ethical values and who values the well-being of future generations. In closing, let me emphasize again that the climate change challenge is urgent and that fast action mitigation must begin as soon as possible. Our generation has the responsibility to address effectively the climate challenge. There is still time to act, although the window of opportunity is rapidly closing. But I remain an optimist. I trust that science, common sense, and our universal ethical values will ultimately prevail. I wish you the very best of luck in your deliberations. Thank you.